So we're going into the Reformation, and this is where the Catholic Church splits in every way under the sun, and nothing remains the same. 1517, Martin Luther, a German teacher and a monk, nails 95 theses to a door. Fast forward 30 years, and you get to Servetus, who rejects the doctrine of the Trinity. And this is probably more accurately a Proto Unitarian than Sabellius was. Sabellius was a non-Trinitarian, but there wasn't a concept at that time exactly in the same way we talk about now. Servetus was a fascinating human. He was born in 1511 in what is present-day Spain, and he was denounced multiple times as a heretic. And there's a whole long story about letters being sent back and forth because his denial of the Trinity, and he gets arrested in 1553 by the Roman Catholic Church and imprisoned in Vienna. And he manages to escape 3 days later. And then he was convicted again of heresy due to letters being sent to people, and he flees to Italy. And for God knows why, he stops in Geneva, where Calvin and his reformers have already denounced him. And he attends a sermon by Calvin in Geneva. Now, it is clear this man will be killed if he's caught, but he's so convicted or attached. And I really, although I agree with him, I don't want to lift him up or paint this as some saint. He attends a sermon by Calvin in Geneva, and he gets arrested afterwards, of course, and imprisoned. And all of his property is confiscated. And French inquisitors try to extradite him, but Calvin needs to prove that he is firm in defense of Christian orthodoxy. And so he condemned Servetus as a criminal. And he gets condemned again on 2 more counts for spreading and preaching non-Trinitarianism. Again, we don't have the word Unitarianism yet. And a couple of other things that I'm not going to go into, but they reference back to Sabellius that I mentioned from 260 Common Era. And he's ultimately executed. But he starts a movement within the traditions of there isn't a Trinity. This is where it's firmly stated that God is one and not 3. And not too far after that, you get another heretic who manages not to be killed, not to be executed, Francis David. And what happens with Francis David changes the world. And develops what we know as today as Edict of Torda, or the Edict de Torda. He was a preacher in Eastern Europe, what we would, at the time, was the Eastern Hungarian Kingdom. That's about 1550 plus or minus. And he convinces the king at the time, King Sigismund, that of a Unitarian belief. And the king is about to, he converts to Unitarianism, and he's about to do what every other monarch in Europe does at this time and say, everyone in my country is now Unitarian. And as a flash forward to today, that area in Europe still has Unitarian, many, and some very large Unitarian Christian churches that are very much Christian, not in the way that mainstream UU is Christian, but like traditional Christian Unitarian churches in Eastern Europe. And Francis David argues, no. Let's give options. Everyone does not have to believe the same to love the same. And the Edict of Torda gets born. It creates the birth of religious freedom in Europe at that point. The Edict of Torda was 1568, and it stated that the faith is the gift of God and prohibited the persecution of individuals on religious grounds. And in practice, the edict only sanctioned the existence of 4 received denominations: Catholic, Lutheran, Calvinist, and Unitarian churches. And it was a decree that authorized local communities to freely elect their preachers. So as we're coming to a close, I got 2 reflection questions for folks. And if you're watching this later, now would be a good time after I ask them to pause and think about it. For those that are here, I'll put them in the chat and I'll read them aloud now. Mainstream portrayals of Christianity tend to suggest that there's been a uniformity of belief and creed, or that there was always a specific creed or way of reading scripture since the time of Jesus. In today's session, were there any surprises for you? And the second set of questions, the Edict of Torda was a sea change for European practice of religious life. Until then, one's faith was essentially the faith of your monarch. How does that reverberate still today? Do we see it alive in our own congregations? And if so, how? Thank you, everybody.